Can you imagine? I said, brother, how you doing? Thank you. Thank you.
I'm always enjoying. It's been. I'm going to my mentoring for the people that.
Hiya.
Hello. Good evening.
Hiya.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. Hi,
How are
Unila.
you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Very fine, thank you.
Where are you zooming in from, Sarah?
From Bordeaux, in France.
Amazing.
And you?
From Abingdon, near Oxford in England.
What time is the next one supposed to start?
Yeah.
Do you have
5 minutes? How's your
because of
how's Vincent and the baby and everything?
Maybe going now.
Everything is fine. Everyone's fine. Thank you.
Ask you what session is this? Oh, wait now.
What is your patient in Europe?
I know, I don't want to. I want to know this. What place you want to? I don't
I'm feeling so jealous of the folks in Lagos.
Sorry?
I can the room, I can see everyone's wearing their tie-dye t-shirts. So it's making me jealous that I'm not at the conference this year.
I think we may be just the two of us. I don't know.
Yeah, I got the impression that Katrine was she sent me an email saying that she will replace Aiden or Samantha.
Yeah.
But I haven't met her before.
Okay, she's saying that she's waiting to get access in the Zoom room. That's strange.
So maybe that's maybe whoever is hosting this from the room needs to give them access.
Hello, is someone there? I don't know if you are.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Could you please accept our moderator?
Okay, yeah, I only have both of you online, so there's no one on the attendance page, so it's just you.
She told me that she's waiting.
Yeah. Shall I copy? Let me copy the email address, and then maybe you can just invite her to the call.
Okay, thank you.
I've put it in the chat.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. Europe.
And so who is invisible host? Is it Sikiru?
Yes.
Greetings, Sikiru. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you. Hi.
You know, we can't see you though. So you're so mysterious.
What do you say?
We can't see you. You can just see the room that's empty.
Oh, I'm here. I'm trying to operate something.
Please, I have some links to share. Can I share them now, or how does it work?
I'm trying to connect with the chair so that when she comes on board, she can moderate
Go
and
ahead,
then ask me to. Yeah, thank you.
Also, Samantha would like to join as well.
Two sessions. The ground downstairs.
This is application to graduate application to Europe.
Okay. To you.
Yep.
Two sessions. I'll go for you.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I sent her an email already. Hoping she gets it.
I sent her an email.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I sent her an email as well because she was telling me that she was on the waiting room.
Okay.
So I told her that you sent her an email, actually, another email.
Thank you. Hang on.
What? Graduate something.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You wanted to try to sit here.
Exactly. Okay, please move to the center.
I don't want to record
And then it's gone up.
Exactly, so that they will know that they are speaking to you.
You said I should.
No,
No, I said yes, please.
He was telling you. What
Yeah, 30 points. I'm not moving up and down.
At least to know that.
Let me show my face so that my person will see me.
Aha.
That you can see me.
We have audience.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, my God.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to see you.
Yes, same here.
Yes.
Okay, I think I can promote her to a panelist now.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay, she's here. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Finally. Hello, how are you?
Hello, very fine, thank you.
Maybe we could give it a few more minutes because I got an email from Samantha. She's trying to connect. So she is entering, I would guess. So maybe let's give it a few more times also so that people who are who are on site can join. Maybe there's still people coming in from one room, going to our room. So I see we've got 2 participants and 1 tech moderator or more. Difficult to see from here, right? So Portia and Sarah already, thank you very much for making the time, for being available tonight. I think we're all in the same time zone except for the people in, well, no, Portia, you're in the UK, yeah? So, but Sarah, you're in France.
Yeah, I'm in France, yeah.
So it's already evening for us.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, Aidan had to attend because of the evening program. So I'm going to check whether Samantha has, and then if within a few minutes, if in a few minutes she's not entering, we will start anyways. Maybe just a question for the room in Lagos. Do you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So as said, supposed to be another person who is trying to log in to connect to come online. And apparently also someone else in the room. In the physical room.
I still need it because you don't have any physical.
Okay, in order not to lose much more time, I propose that I start by introducing us. So hello everybody. I've been asked to chair this panel. My name is Katrien Piepe. I'm an associate professor at the University of Leuven in Belgium, KU Leuven University. I'm an anthropologist, and I will be one of the respondents as well here because one of our interlocutors cannot participate. It's Dr. Aidan Russell, who is at the Geneva Graduate Institute, who, because of conflicting commitments, couldn't attend tonight, and it was a bit too late to find someone to replace him. He did say, though, if anybody would be interested, hello, Samantha. We're doing the introductions. He did say that if there's some interest to go to Switzerland, you're always welcome to send him an email, and he would be able to answer on any question. He would try to answer on any questions you have in case you're interested in setting up graduate studies in a Swiss university. Then I'm going to move on to the participants who are here. So the first person, Portia Roelofs. Dr. Portia Roelofs is a lecturer in politics in the Department of Political Economy and has had degrees from Oxford, so as an LSE, has been a postdoctoral fellowship at the LSE and at St. Anne's College in Oxford, but also has been a visiting researcher in Nigerian universities, Ibadan, Maiduguri. And I just see I had not mentioned in which university. So KCL, which is, can you help me here? King's College London. Yeah. So Portia is well suited to give a lot of information about setting up PhD research in the UK. Second person we have online is Dr. Sarah Panata, who is a chercheur enseignant, researcher and lecturer with a tenured position at the CNRS, the French Research Center. She's affiliated with Sciences Po Bordeaux and is a historian. Her research is about political and social history, feminist and female mobilizations in sub-Saharan Africa, especially Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. And then in a more abstract manner, social movement and citizenship. And then we have Dr. Samantha Iwowo here, who is at Bournemouth University, also in the United Kingdom, who is an academic directing drama, film, and TV, so works in the creative industries as a chair of the Industry to Academia Research Series. And so also and she's in the Faculty of Media and Communication. So I think we've got two people with experience of graduate studies in the UK, one in France, and then me in Belgium. So the way that we have set up, I don't know whether someone saw my email. The way that we've set up the panel is there are 5 questions, and depending on time, not everybody will be answering all 5 questions. But the colleagues have decided which questions they feel most comfortable answering on. So Sarah, feel free to answer also any question, any of the topics. So the first one would be, what do you need to consider when you pick out the graduate program that you think you want to apply for, that you want to enroll in? And I think well, maybe so. Maybe Samantha, do you want to say something about that? We don't hear you. You're muted. You are still muted. You need to unmute yourself.
One moment.
Now it's
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much. I've been in transit, so the mails that came in today structuring the session, I only got a chance to see them not so long ago. But happy to be here, and thanks to our audience, and thanks for having me, Catherine Pipe. And I think I identified 2 questions I would be speaking to. I would have loved to get to the third one, but there was no time. So I'll be speaking to the what admissions committee look for in application dossier. But just to shift the registers a little bit, I would attempt to answer the questions as best as I can.
Sorry. That's already, one of the other questions. So maybe because the questions are also in a logical order, structured. So we'll come back to that. But regarding what to pick or, what to consider when picking a graduate program, maybe from the Belgian experience, then maybe I could say, you may want to look into programs offer fellowships. It's not automatic that there's a fellowship coming with a graduate program. Some universities allow self-funded PhD students to enroll, but that's not all universities. Sometimes even within a university, there may be a diversity within the various programs. So I think the financial part will be one important thing. Can you apply for internal money? Can the tuition fee be waived or not? And that kind of information may be would be important to compare which programs may be more relevant or not. You may also want to look into which programs demand a yearly tuition fee. For example, in Belgium, for graduate studies, you only pay the tuition fee in your first year and in the year that you defend. And other graduate programs may request an annual tuition fee to be paid. Another element to think about when you pick a graduate program is also to look into the kind of supervisory committee structure that there is. I think you do not want a program in which you only have one supervisor and that person is your only point of reference, your only contact point, your only sparring partner of IDs. I think it's important to have a kind of committee around you, and not every program has that kind of structure written into the program. So you may want to look for programs that say that there's a supervisory committee of maybe 3 or 4 people that from the beginning are guiding you and working with you. So obviously there would be one among the 4 who would be the leader, but that one, you don't want to depend on one single person, because sometimes there may be a fallout in person, your personalities may not match. or that one person may have, may not feel your kind of, approach towards a project or a research question. And then if you have other members in your supervisory committee, then their voices may convince the other person, like, oh, this is also valid research. So I think, yeah, a structure with multiple supervisors is always helpful. So these would be two elements that I would think of. A third one may also be about the length, duration of the graduate program. So in universities, there's a limit of how many years you can be enrolled as a PhD student. The universities, there's no limit. It's not meant, as long as you pay your yearly tuition fee, you're fine. But like in Leuven, in my university, for example, you can maximally be enrolled for 6 years in a graduate program. It's not that there are no ways out. If you see in year 4, you're not going to make it in 6 years, you could enroll in year 5 and year 6 part-time, which would give another extension of 2 years, for example. But these are things that you need to know, because visa-wise, this may have repercussions. So that kind of structures, limitations, time-wise, financially, and in terms of supervisory supervision or arrangements in supervision would be, according to me, things to think about. I don't know whether there's anyone here who wants to add something. Yeah, Portia?
Hiya. And yeah, just to say thank you so much to the organizers, and greetings to Lagos Studies. Hope you're all having a great time. Thank you to the audience for coming, and the other panelists. I thought, yeah, singers were all from quite different systems. I could give a really rough overview of just what is the broad outline of a English social science PhD. And I said that that's probably going to be the same in Wales and Scotland as well. So pretty much UK-based PhD. So over time, it's become much more codified. So it used to be maybe closer to what Katrina's explaining, where you could kind of keep going as long as you wanted. In the UK, it's become much more codified, and there's a lot of pressure on students and universities for the PhD to finish in 3 years, or 4 years if you're just writing it. And so I did not finish in 4 years. No one on my PhD program finished in 4 years, but the movement of kind of change is that there's pressure to finish in 3 years. And normally you'll apply, you'll spend your first year kind of finalizing your research design and your plan, and doing some kind of training courses and doing literature review. You'd spend your second year on data collection, and you'd spend your third writing up. So that's a very rough kind of what a politics PhD might look like. You're likely to sign up with a primary supervisor and a secondary supervisor. So you don't have quite as much choices as what Katrina's talking about with the kind of team. But in King's, for example, we're moving towards having a panel of 3. But so for a British PhD application, finding that primary supervisor to take you on and working out who is the best person, who's doing the most relevant research, what's the closest scholar in the UK working on what you're trying to work on, they would be your primary supervisor. And then I would also just say that funding is a real challenge in the UK, because there is very little funding available for doing a PhD, which would mean you would have to be paying your fees, but also your living expenses. So my advice is to try and get funding if you can, and work out which schemes you might be eligible for. And so often your choice of where to apply will be driven by where is offering funding. And the main way that happens for social sciences is via 2 UK funding councils called the ESRC, so the Economic and Social Research Council, and the AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And they give money to something called doctoral training partnerships, which are groups of universities. And then those groups of universities disperse the money. but there is not a lot of money and it doesn't get to very many people, unfortunately. So for example, at King's, we're part of the LIS DTP, and that would be, you'd apply to your supervisor in your chosen university, and then normally they would have to agree to put you in for this ESRC funding, and it would be a higher bar. So in the UK at the moment, I would say it's pretty easy to get onto a PhD program. It's really difficult to get funding. There's a big gap between the competitiveness of those two things. And then just to give the audience a benchmark, so that ESRC studentship, if it was for a politics PhD, would be covering the fees for 3 years, and it would be covering your living expenses, but it's quite a low amount. So it's £19,000, which is well below the medium income in the UK. And many people find it really just covers their rent. So that's a kind of a rough overview, I'd say, of what a PhD looks like if you were thinking about, is the UK somewhere I'm interested in? But I'll leave it to the others who might have more kind of subject specific or France specific.
Thank you, Portia. Sarah?
Thank you, Catherine, for your introduction. And yeah, I would like maybe to say some words about the French system that is quite peculiar, and it's quite complex. But yeah, once you understand it, it also offers several good possibilities. So in France, I mean, I would say a system in between what Catherine and what Portia were saying. So you can, if you have a master degree or an equivalent, you can always apply for a PhD program, and you can always enroll even if you don't have fundings. So this is quite, I mean, it's good if you have some funds to live and to sustain yourself in France, because the fees, the PhD fees, are very low if you compare them with England, I guess. Roughly, they are about 500 euros per year, so it is quite affordable, I guess, if you compare with other countries. However, the cost of living in France is quite high, so I do not. I mean, I'm not advising you not to try for external fundings, because it's important also. I mean, it's a job, so it's important also to be paid for it. But if you have personal funds, it's also possible to enroll in a PhD program. And in France, you just need one supervisor, but you can, of course, go for two. And we are always encouraging PhD joint programs. So if you, for example, you want to apply for a PhD in Nigeria, we also encourage a supervisor from a university in Nigeria and a supervisor from a university here in France. And so basically the two main conditions to apply for a PhD program is to find a good supervisor. I think we will come back to it later. And also to either to have funds or to apply for external fundings.
Okay, Samantha, unless you really want to add something, I move on to the next question. We cannot all answer on all the questions that have been, but I see you unmuted yourself, so I think you want to add something. Go for it.
No, not exactly. I'll go with you, Chair. Yeah. And I'll speak to the points where you allow me to speak.
Well, no, you can choose, but yeah, 3 out of the 5, I would say.
No, it's all right. I'll go with your leadership, yeah.
Okay, so this next topic is then about contacting prospective supervisors, do's and don'ts. So obviously, when you're going to prepare a PhD, you don't do it on your own. You look for advisor. And Sarah has already mentioned something about it, but both Sarah and Portia had indicated that this would be a topic they can say something about. So I'm giving the floor first to Sarah and then to Portia. And I don't know, Samantha, if you feel like adding something, just give me a sign after Portia. Yeah.
Could I say something? At the start, I was trying to let you know the two I had prepared. I wasn't going to go into the details. So I was going to say that the two I had prepared were the admissions committees look for in application dossier. and what writing a competitive PhD proposals may look like. Those were the things I was going to say.
Oh, well, okay, then, but in
Just
case you
an
get
idea.
inspired by what they're saying, just then give me a sign. But Sarah, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, well, how to proceed when you want to contact a supervisor? First of all, I would suggest, of course, to look for supervisors online. I prepared like a list of links where you can maybe browse and look for lectures on studies in France. You can either search by themes or by region and countries or area, geographic area of interest. So, sorry. So first of all, in an email, it's very important to, I mean, it's quite kind of basic, but I know that it's not always the case. It's very important to introduce yourself. So we receive a lot of emails and we don't know who are the students contacting us, what is their background, their institution, their qualifications. So as I was, sorry?
There's some background noise in the room. Please continue.
Yeah, so it's very important to explain a little bit who you are. As I was mentioning, it's important for you to have a master degree before applying. So what is your background basically? And then present also proposed topic. So maybe your research questions or sociology and the central argument of your PhD. And also explain why you are contacting a specific supervisor. So sometimes I notice that all my colleagues in my lab, we receive the same email, standard email, and it is not very useful. It's important that you choose someone who is of any interest for you and for what you are doing. So either their work or you think that the approach are useful for your research, but please try and inform yourself on the person that you are contacting, and try also to show in the email why do you want to work with person. And yeah, to write a personalized message, basically avoid generic emails to multiple scholars and professors. And maybe at the end of the year, propose a meeting to, if relevant, discuss the projects. And also, I think an important thing to keep in mind is that, at least in France, if a supervisor accepts you, then the person has to defend your own project in front of other colleagues. So that's why also it's important that your project is relevant for the person that you're contacting. Because, for example, I'm a historian working on Nigeria. If I'm presenting something on anthropology of health in Zambia, it's obvious that my colleagues are not supporting me, because it's nothing, I mean, this has nothing to do with my research. And so it's not useful for me to supervise you, and it's not useful for you to have me as supervisor. So try to make it clear in the email that there is a link and a reason why you are contacting the person.
Thank you, Sarah. Portia?
Hi. Yeah, so just to build on what Sarah has said already, one slight difference is in the UK system, at least within King's, it's quite a decentralized decision. So it's really up to the supervisor whether they want to take you on. So they're not having to do that kind of work of externally justifying it. And I also really agree, it's important to think carefully and personalize your email approach, and explain why that exact supervisor would be a good fit for your project. And that might be things like you read their work as part of your master's or kind of pre-doctoral work, and you found it really inspiring, or you like their approach, or they have expertise that's relevant. when I was thinking through this and I was thinking about kind of what makes an effective approach email, what I kind of thought was we want to be seen, we don't want to be flattered. So sometimes I receive emails that say, dear Professor, in light of your very fantastic contributions to the field and your august expertise and your position within the discipline, and it's very flattering, but then I realize it's actually has nothing to do with my work. And so the sort of email I might take more notice of is if someone says, you know, so I'm interested in patronage. And I read your piece from 2019 where you make the following argument about patronage. I thought that was interesting because I could also apply it to a case I'm familiar with. Or I like this approach because it contrasts with this other approach from this other scholar that I kind of disagree with. Or I was convinced of something you said about how we should approach this topic, and I want to approach that topic in the same way. And then I think my key point in terms of that kind of initial email is that PhD supervisors really want to supervise people they can have a productive working relationship with. And so that email approach and that kind of discussion, even before you submit the application, is like the initial trial of that productive working relationship. And so that's things of like, you know, if they reply to your email, can you send a reply? It doesn't have to be immediately, but, you know, within a couple of days, showing that you're responsive. And the key thing for me is, are you responsive to feedback? That for me is what I'm looking for in a student. If I give them suggestions, do they go away and think seriously about those suggestions and then kind of reflect on them and bring me back a piece of work that shows that they've taken that on board? Or they can disagree with it, but I want them to show that they've really thought about it. So this might take the form of, you might approach someone with like an abstract or a short proposal that you have already. And if they get back to you and say, yeah, I kind of work on that topic, but I take a slightly different approach. You know, I'm attaching an article that I wrote on it. If that student could then come back and say, okay, well, I've read this article. On page 6, you say this, which I actually do find quite convincing. And so maybe I would change my proposal in this way. For me, that sort of responsiveness to feedback would be a really good sign that, okay, this is someone who's able to be part of that productive kind of dialogic working relationship. And it doesn't always have to be agreement. It could be, oh, I've seen you taking this approach. I think I would take this different approach, but I still think it's, you know, aligned in this wider way. So feedback and response. I would also say that that initial approach has to be leaving enough time to have some back and forth before you submit a final application. So that could be up to a year before you actually submit an application, especially for things, because they're good. If I get and shows that they're responsive to feedback, but been in straight work with people to then be competitive to get funding. But that's going to take time. And that might take a number of meetings where we have a conversation on Zoom, and then you go away and spend maybe another 4 weeks working on it, and then you send it back to me. And so that kind of back and forth is going to start even before you start the PhD. So I would say the minimum is 8 weeks, but it could be 3 months, it could be up to a year. That's the sort of time horizons I'm working with. And then also just to say, I think you can be really open and honest about what options you're pursuing and what it is you want from a PhD that allows that supervisor to work out, okay, is this person a kind of a good fit for me? So you can tell them if you're applying to lots of different places, that's really useful. They might say, oh yeah, actually so-and-so at Edinburgh is a better fit for you. I'd really go for that one. And yeah, and being honest about, you know, are you aiming to be an academic after this? Are you doing a PhD so that you can then go into politics or into policy work? All of that information is really, really useful for a prospective supervisor, and it allows them to get a sense of whether they would be a good fit for your project. And I think sometimes there's a sense of, well, I just want to do a PhD and I will do any PhD. You know, you tell me what I have to do and I'll do it. But the risk is, this is like a 3-year marriage that you're entering into with the supervisor, and you want that to be a happy marriage. And it's better to wait and find the right person rather than just say, sometimes I get an approach saying, I'd like to do a PhD in politics or economics or development studies, open to anything, and that doesn't reassure me that it's going to be a kind of a successful project. So I'll leave it there, and I'm sure the others have other things to add as well.
Well, thank you, Portia. I do think, yeah, the only thing that I want to insist on is indeed when you're sending that introductory email, that you actually explain in a concrete fashion the relevance of that scholar. Because sometimes I also get emails, too vague. And the worst are even those emails that actually are addressed to another person, that you see that that person is just sending out one and the same email to various lecturers and professors, and didn't even bother to change the address line or the name of the university where you're working at. So, and I tend not to answer on that kind of emails. And so that's really, it shows, that you just randomly write to people, while what you want to see in an aspiring PhD student and kind of accuracy, attentiveness, not even to detail, to the name of the person that you're addressing. So that's a don't. The do is, be as concrete as possible and explain why you think there would be a match between you and that particular professor. Because maybe, another aspect could be you've heard such good echoes about other people having been advised and supervised by that same person. And you may have heard that that particular professor has a particular pedagogy, a particular supervisory style, which may be, your project may be a bit beyond the classic thematical experience or interests of the particular professor, but because of the pedagogy, you may say, oh, this is something that I like and I think would fit well for me. So that also could be an argument to try to convince the addressee that you could be a good combination for the project that you're working on. So we need to move on to number 3. The third question is about what admission committees look for in an application dossier. And I know that Samantha, among others, has prepared an answer on that question. So please, Samantha.
Thank you. Yeah. So as I was saying at the start, I'm happy to answer the question as best as I can. I propose to well-being, to centering the prospective applicant. So I start by saying this. Indeed, what's the typically I have about I have 5 doctoral students I supervise, and of play. By that I mean the literature in the space and what beautiful Bournemouth. I like to boast about Bournemouth.
Yeah. It looks like we're back, but maybe Katrine isn't back.
Yeah, so we wait for the chair, right?
But you could go ahead, Samantha. I'm sure we're in good hands with you.
All right. So some of the things we look out for, the typical things we look out for. What is the state of play? By that I mean, what's the literature? What's the literature out there? And what are the gaps? Particularly the gaps relating to what you are planning, what you are intending, hoping, proposing to plug. Yeah. And that ties into handy to have in your kitty. there is also the importance of how relevant is this research topic. Yeah, and I'll speak about that. I'll speak a little to transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity, which is the phase we're moving into now in terms of what attracts me to prospective research students. So for now, state of play, relevance of your subject matter, methodologies. You know, what do you have a clarity of the methods you are using, as well as the theoretical underpinnings? By that I mean, the theory is the worldview with which you approach. The methodology is the combination of the worldview and the method you select, and why you select that method. Yeah. So these are some of the things we want to see. We also want to see capacity to complete your study within a given time. I think Portia has spoken to what typically obtains in the UK. And particularly for international students, the timing is stringent because we always have to feed back to the Home Office that the student is working within the time frame. In addition to that, there is the importance of thinking about your access to data. Yeah. So have you got the networks? Have you got the access to the data, or the field of research where you'll be going to interact with the people concerned with the subject matter? And what is your understanding of ethics? Yeah. A large degree, what's your understanding of a little bit into that when I to a proposal. So I then shift, but then again, there's a few things that are not very often discussed, and this is that there is a burden on higher educations in the UK to recruit. So there are potentials that recruitment happens, and Portia, I think, has alluded to the fact that admission these days are not so stringent. Yeah. So there is the tendency that could happen because fees need to be funding. Well, universities need to be funded. Yes. So you want to do your due diligence to be sure that you're going to be studying in a place which is suitable for you. And this leads me to that shift I was talking about. So I am increasingly concerned that academic agents are quick to insisting that potential applicants fulfill the requirements of the university and they prioritize the dignity of the prospective student. Yeah. So I invite us to begin to consider as prospective international students to dare to ask the question, is this institution good for me? How diverse is it? What is the ethos in there? Yeah, these are quite uncomfortable questions, but really important, because the lack of without such an understanding, we find that if an international student, let me give an example of Nigeria, which I'm familiar with. If a person from Nigeria comes to school in the UK in an institution that doesn't have that ground in that sensitivity to multiculturality, and is exposed to microaggressions, there is so much you can take in that one becomes what Fanon speaks about. You turn away from yourself in trying to ward off the indignities. Yeah. So these are really important. So what university is this? What is the ethos like? How diverse is it? How open is it to multiculturality? How well do they understand the nuances of my culture are not indications of deficiency, but a difference that should not be othered? Yeah, quite important. So center yourself as you apply for universities. You are most important in that process, and must see yourself as such. Because if you don't, you defer to the points where you are afraid to even assert yourself within your study. Yeah, and it ultimately affects your well-being. So I yield here. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Sarah?
Yeah, maybe just a little something to add, because then I have maybe more to say on the fifth question. So I just thank you, Samantha, for this. I think it's really important, and also, for example, in France, it's also important for you to see what are the possibility in the doctoral schools you are applying, for you to do your field work. because if you are, at least in France, if you have a PhD contract, we go back to it later, it doesn't mean that you have money to do you have grants, sorry, to do your field work, and different. And it is very important because you have a grant to live in the country, but how do you go to the field? How do you go to Nigeria? How do you do your interviews? So it's also important for you to have a sense of the environment. Is this university able to finance my field work? Do they care about the field work in Nigeria? What are the other scholars in this university studying? And so these are also important questions, because it's not just, I mean, doing a PhD, but also the conditions for you to do a good work, and a good you can be, I mean, happy about. So yeah.
Thank you, Portia.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Samantha for sort of taking the conversation up a level and shifting that perspective. I think you're absolutely right that in some ways it's a kind of, there's really like, it's a situation of competition for good PhD students. So if you're a good PhD student with funding, you're incredibly in demand. So both at the level of, and I'm speaking about the kind of UK case, so both at the level of universities who want the fees. So just now I looked up what the King's international fees are, and it blew my mind. You know, they're potentially getting £28,000 a year from international students. Over 3.5 years, you know, that's almost £100,000. But also, so to give you an insight from my own university, so there are career motivations for individual scholars to supervise PhD projects as well. So, for example, our promotion criteria require us to have supervised a certain number of PhD students. So I think you're absolutely right that you know, if you've got a good proposal, you're actually quite a kind of hot commodity, especially if you're kind of competitive for funding. And so I just thought I would add into that to both what Samantha and Sarah were saying about kind of what could you do in terms of due diligence. Once you think you've got a good proposal, you kind of feel like you know some different options of supervisors. So first of all, applying to quite a few different places, maybe like 6, 7, 8. And then in the hope that you then come out of that maybe with 4 or 5 offers. And then once you've got those 4 or 5 offers, you can really start to drill down and see, okay, so all of these places are supervisors who are broadly within my topic area. Now let me find out where I will have the best experience. So I would say, again, you want to know that there's going to be a productive working dialogue between you and the supervisor. So if they say an immediate uncritical yes to your application and then don't say anything else, I would think that's a bit of a red flag. If they don't have any comments on your proposal, if they don't want to be in contact at all before you start, I would kind of worry a bit that maybe they are just ticking a box and you'll show up and you'll be their 20th PhD student and they'll forget you exist. I don't know if this is normal, but it's something that I have encouraged prospective supervisees to do with me, is to ask if it's possible to be put in touch with their current or previous supervisees. And so that's where, like, you can talk to someone who's already working with that supervisor and get a sense of, are they easy to work with? And then you could also, at the departmental level, what is their provision for PhD students? What are their facilities for PhD students? It might sound obvious, but one question is, do they have office space or workspace for PhD students, and of what nature? So they should be able to kind of get back to you and say, yes, we have this office and it's shared, and, you know, we have 30 desks and we have, you know, a weekly seminar, or, you know, ideally they'd be able to put you in touch with a PhD rep who could also give you kind of a better point of view on it. But you know, it's possible that you could sign up for this PhD and it turns out there's no room, there's nowhere to go in the university. There's no one else to meet. No one that goes in. They all work remotely online, and you kind of show up in the UK and then you're kind of lacking a community. So I think if there's somewhere that has a strong community, they should be able to kind of evidence that in some way. And then one other tiny thing about what you might want to consider doing to make yourself kind of attractive and find a good supervisor is if there's anything in your academic record, for example, that is not going to be easy for someone in that country to understand. So if you have your degree from France and your master's degree from France and you're applying to the UK, you may need to put some work in your kind of application to explain what those grades mean. I'm just thinking, like, in France, everyone seems to have a lot of postgraduate degrees, and I've received applications with like dozens of certificates and transcripts, and I've had no idea what they mean. So I think just thinking through if you're kind of studying in different academic environments, making sure to explain honestly a way of translating. You know, don't say, oh, and these are fantastic grades if they're not. If they're middling grades, that's fine. Just to say that kind of, oh, this is the equivalent of a kind of mid 2-1 or a low 2-1. And maybe on that note, it's worth saying, so in the UK, we would normally be a kind of a benchmark would be that someone needs a good 2-1 in their master's studies, which we score out of 100, but realistically people are scoring between about like 50 and 75 on any degree. So we would be looking at something at least over 60 as a bare minimum, probably over 65, so a good 2-1. And then if you have a first in your undergraduate studies or your master studies, that's fantastic, and you should highlight that to the person you're applying to. But realistically, if you're not scoring in that kind of high 2-1 bracket, you're not going to be competitive for funding. And so that might make a supervisor less reluctant. I just realized I didn't say that before, and that might be a kind of like basic picture, but again, others might complicate that, or it may not be the case in other countries.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I will just add that in Leuven we are actually also, as Samantha also mentioned, it's about the strong methodologies. In Leuven, we're especially looking whether the prospective PhD student has already been trained in like the basic methods that are required for that project. Because sometimes there are students who, I'm an anthropologist, who come from other disciplines, but maybe have never done participant observation, and are not used to that method. But it requires, this is a really long-term training that is required to do that kind of research also in an ethical manner. And it's very difficult if you start learning that on the level of the PhD. It is something that you had to with you graduate students. So experience in like the core methods of the proposed project. That's something that we certainly look for. So because after all, this is like third level. This is a PhD program. You cannot think that you're just going to catch up very quickly with the basics on a PhD level. This is just not the case. Otherwise, there's no need to do a BA and an MA degree before starting a PhD. So don't underestimate that, and which also means that if in your trajectory you have not learned about certain methods, then don't pretend that you know them or that you will quickly fix that. Either adjust your research question and your research project, or take already, while you're still on an MA project or in an MA trajectory, take still some additional courses that can train you there. And because then the transcript of your courses will show, okay, maybe if my main program doesn't give that kind of training, I did do some electives which have taught me the basics of that method. And that's really crucial because it's PhD, it's super advanced studies. It's not basic studies. So it's building on what is supposed to have been taught already and mastered through the MA program, through an MA program. So that's something that is very important. So we're moving on to the fourth question. There are 5 in total. The next one is writing a competitive PhD proposal. And so I think that Portia has proposed to answer on that question. Please go ahead.
Sure. I'll also try and keep my comments brief because, first of all, I think Samantha's covered it quite well already. And second, I can see we're kind of getting towards like half an hour less mark, and I imagine everyone also wants dinner, so we may be running low on attention. So yeah, the kind of ingredients of a good proposal, I would say normally, at least for my field of kind of social science, politics, anthropology, is to find a debate in the literature, and then to find an interesting, compelling case that you can use to get at that debate in the literature. So I'm gonna, so like 2 examples that of students I'm working with and prospective students at the moment is, you could say, well, you know, AI is this interesting new phenomenon. There are debates about how we should govern it. Is it this fantastic laissez-faire, we should just let the tech people get on with it and see what happens, or should there be very heavy regulation and kind of incremental? So that's a debate in the literature. And then you might find that, it turns out Chile has the most advanced regulation on AI and the most ambitious, and they're seeking to be feminist, and they're seeking to be collaborative and cooperative. Okay, well, this is interesting. We have a case that specifically speaks to this debate topic. This would be a way of kind of getting some traction on this debate topic by looking at it through this case. And then you need to come up with a question to which you do not already know the answer. Is sometimes missing. Some people say, I am going to study Chile. I'm going to study them on AI governance. And I am going to find that Chile's AI governance falls short. And I think, well, then you don't need to do the PhD if you already know what you're going to find. So finding a question that you do not already know the answer to. And then, again, as Samantha said, in the methods, proposing some sense of how it is you're going to answer that question. And so that's a kind of broad picture of how do you write a proposal. What I would also say, just maybe something that isn't so obvious, and I think is sometimes missing from these applications, is there needs to be some account of why you are the right person to write this PhD, and why it is that you are likely to do it within that 3-year time frame, or kind of 4 years or 6 years. And for me as a supervisor in the UK, between 9 and 18 months, you do something called an upgrade, which is like a mini PhD viva, where your supervisors and an external panel member read like a 20,000 word document, and they test you for 2 hours in a discussion about what are you going to do? What's your research design? And that's because that's when they kind of let you free on the world, and you go out and you do your data collection. So in the proposal, I'm wanting to know that someone within kind of about a year is going to be ready to be set free as an independent researcher doing research in the world. And there are some of the things that Katrine talked about, prior experience academically and methods training, are really important. But there are other things that I think sometimes, especially coming from Nigeria and then applying to the UK, people kind of invisibilize, and yet they're kind of huge resources. So like language, people write applications being like, I'm going to be in Igbo land, I'm going to be working with militias, and they never say like, oh, and I speak 4 languages. Like, that's amazing. Can you imagine if a white person spoke 4 African languages? It would be at the top of their CV and like flashing lights. And there are these implicit skills that sometimes the prospective students I work with have that they don't realize are so valuable. Making visible. And then also it might be that there are things around your networks or your access or your contacts that mean that you'd be able to kind of hit the ground running. So again, if you want to work with militias, or you want to do interviews with like party organizers in Akwa Ibom, if there's some reason why you'd be especially able to do that research, and you have those links and you have those ways in, or maybe you've done a research or kind of done a political organizing, somehow if you have some evidence that you are someone who can go out there, find these people doing this interesting stuff out there in the world and connect with them and get them to talk to you, that's also really helpful as well. So yeah, that's maybe the kind of extra thing I think is sometimes left out.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wants to add something to this?
Yeah, I think I prepared a few.
Briefly, please. 2 minutes?
I'll try. So just to extend what Portia has said, it's really valuable when we value the indigenous agency we have. So Portia speaks about you acknowledging the soft skills, the languages, the diversity of languages, multiplicity of languages you speak in relation to research wherever necessary. I took it a little forward to getting us to begin to think or advancing our understanding of tonality in relation to research. Yeah. Rigorous written tends to demonstrate positionality, which is what Posh talking about. Your proximity to the research you're about to engage in. In addition to that, again, self-care. What are your intersections, your vulnerabilities, your agencies, your understanding of power, and very importantly, how aware are you of epistemic violence? Epistemic violence, in a nutshell, is that sort of approach to knowledge which we were all raised in, the colonial constructs of knowledge, and we tend to, even when we seek to sometimes, even when we seek to work on research that is challenging those violence, we tend to rehash them. So it is helpful for people to recognize positionality in relation to the subject matter, as well as what epistemic violence means and how to avoid them, understand them, name them, yeah, and negotiate them. Yeah, quite important, because we overlook that. And that brings about upgrading quality of research proposal, also along the lines of thinking of interdisciplinary research. So where you bring in different disciplines that are necessary questions that you'll be asking, or the research you'll be undertaking. Yeah, interdisciplinarity, something to think about. And transdisciplinarity, yeah, where you move beyond the interdisciplinary approach to the transdisciplinary, which means where you work with locations outside of academia. You think about proposals in the light of these layers of thought, you ultimately end up with a rigorous proposal. Yeah, the world is moving towards these areas. That's why I'm harping on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the final thing that I would add, it may seem obvious, but do know that sometimes it doesn't happen, but make sure that the language, the spelling and the grammar is correct. And make sure that your reference list is in the proposal and that the reference list is complete and correct. So don't count on AI only to make your reference list, because it really doesn't. AI ChatGPT hallucinates, and can give sources that don't exist. And imagine, you will be sending it to experts who may know some of these authors maybe personally, who may know very well their CVs, their bibliographies. You don't want to be called out on, oh, this reference doesn't exist. So really be mindful of that. So we're moving on to the final topic, which is about funding for graduate education. And I think it was Sarah who has prepared some notes on funding for graduate education.
So the doctoral school is basically provide research supervision, of course, but also trainings like methodology, writing, communication skills, etc. So each doctoral schools has different fellowship. So what I suggest is that when you write to your supervisor is to ask also for the doctoral school and the possibilities of the doctoral school, because each school is different, and in some schools you need to speak French and to write your PhD in French, so it is not very useful, but little by little things are improving, and even Francophone speakers can choose to write in English. So that's an important point you should put in your email when you are contacting a supervisor. Apart from doctoral fellowships, you can also have research project funding. So this is called in France, French National Research Agency. So basically a researcher is proposing a big research and offering PhD fellowship linked to their own project. So in this case, you don't have a PhD proposal, you have to up a specific. So I don't mean sounds good because the person is using something that is very close to what you are interested in it. But I mean, sometimes you have to. I mean, you don't have a big choice. Yeah, it's not for everyone. And to follow this course for PhD students, you can, for example, and follow the social network of IFRA Nigeria, the French Institute for Research in Africa, based in Sudan. They always publish calls for PhD fellowship related to bigger projects. And then the last option that I don't know, I think is I think it could be a very good one, is to apply for research institute contracts. So for example, the National Center for Scientific Research I'm affiliated with, they propose contracts for PhD students. It's normally it's a 3-year contract, fully funded, and you, in this specific institution, you can of course propose your own topic, and very often the PhD is done in a way that you can spend half of the time in your institution in France and half of the time in an institution in Nigeria. This is the type of PhD I did as well, and this you have really time to do your field work, and you are less under a French way of working. So you have more, you can navigate the system a little bit more. I think these are the 3 options. And again, when you contact a supervisor, do not hesitate to tell clearly, I need fundings. What are the options? What can you suggest? Because we are also here, I mean, to help you finding your ways.
Yeah, I would add that for Flanders in Belgium, there is the National Fund of Scientific Research, the FWO. And for that, you need to minimally have obtained distinction in your MA program. So you may want to look into what the equivalent is of the grades that are being given in your home institution. So to check whether already, technically speaking, you're eligible in Flanders, funding from the so-called Global Minds program, which is funding for scholars from the Global South. And so they have their own deadlines, their own processes, and so if you're reaching out to one of my colleagues or me, you may want to flag, like, you've heard about the Global Minds funding, and that you are interested in applying for that as well. Usually we propose for both the Global Minds and then the National Fund, to maximize your chances. Apart from that, you may also see that there are many projects that are being funded on which there are vacancies for PhD researchers, then which already have like large themes identified, but they're looking then for sub-projects or maybe personal approaches towards the larger theme. So then you don't get a grant as such, but you're getting a salary, you're getting paid on a project. So then you apply to be enrolled in a project while at the same time being enrolled in a PhD program. So that's something that is actually more and more of a route towards a PhD degree as the funding landscape in Europe has changed. PIs, professors also need to apply for project funding on which they hire PhD students and postdocs. But the project has, the project questions, the project methodologies usually are already identified within the larger project that has been approved. And then it's an issue of, fitting in with your own research interests, and your own CV and your own experience, but it's certainly a route. So yeah, I don't know whether Portia or Samantha want to say something, want to add. No. Then I think we can end here our conversations and we open the floor to the room in Lagos. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. And if it's for one of us in particular, please say to whom. Or if it's a question in general to all of us, please also identify it's for all of us. So we have about 20 minutes, I guess, but yes, okay.
Okay, hi. Thank you all so much for your insights. My question is regarding research interest alignment. So my research interest is focused on women and religion right now. I may change, I do not know, but it is focused on women and religion right now. So I would like to ask, you guys have emphasized very well on contacting a supervisor that you share the same research interest with. So if you find a potential supervisor who is very good in gender history, because the topic I want to explore is women exegetics in Nigeria. So if I find a supervisor who I feel is very good in gender history, but is not affiliated with anything concerning religion, can I go ahead and send my application to that supervisor? That's my question, please.
Could I answer that? Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks very much for your question. I do think you could, if the potential supervisor is experienced in intersectionality. Intersectional identities also address religion just as they address culture in the context of gender. So I think that there's a possibility that you could explore someone whose breadth of research is not only focused on religion, but how religion intersects other gender and other aspects of lived realities. Does that answer your question?
I would just add to that we need to talk about disciplines. And so you haven't identified whether your MA degree is in religious studies, whether it's in sociology, whether it's in cultural studies. And so that already determines your access to particular PhD programs. So there could be someone in philosophy who works on gender, but then that would most probably not be the most appropriate person for a PhD if your MA is in religious studies. So I would certainly recommend you to also think about your disciplinary background and the discipline in which that person is also in which department that person is. I don't know, Sarah, do you agree with me or not? Because I don't know how to read your expression.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think discipline is important. It depends a little bit on on the country you would like to apply. For example, in France, we don't have PhD in religious studies or African studies, but all our PhD are linked to a discipline. I mean, a discipline meaning, sorry, history, anthropology, or it's quite classical. So you really need to, yeah, to put discipline on the table. What kind of, even though you can, as Samantha was mentioning, uh, you can have different methods, but your PhD will be in a specific discipline. So it's important for you to identify your discipline, your main methods, and then of course you can discuss with your supervisors on how to adjust in order also to for you to be able to intersect the different methodologies. But please do not hesitate to contact me, because I'm a historian. I work a lot on these topics. But if you don't want to work in history, I can also link you with other colleagues in different institutions in Europe. I'm quite familiar with these topics.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. I'm actually a history student. I'm also a history student, and I would love to explore more on gender, and if I can add it with religion, but my focus is on gender.
Okay, but do not hesitate to write me an email. We can continue our discussion.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Thank you all.
Thank you. There was a question from an online participant, and the question is regarding an MA degree, if you can choose your supervisor or whether the institution assigns the supervisor. And I think in my institution, you do not choose your MA thesis supervisor. It's our program that makes the matching, the combination, depending not only on thematic experience, but also on a balanced supervision load among the various lectures. I leave it to Portia, Sarah, and Samantha to say whether in their institution it's different or not. So it's about MA thesis supervision. Can a prospecting MA thesis student choose their own MA thesis supervisor?
Just to say, so I think that would vary a lot depending on the MA and the institution. In King's, I basically get allocated someone by a colleague who looks at all of the topics and says, "Oh, I think this is kind of similar," but there's much less of a fit at MA level than there is at PhD level. So yeah, let me leave it there because I'm sure there are other questions.
Can I just answer that as well? Because I think it'll be quite important to some people. So there's some nuance to this as well here in Bournemouth University. So if you're taking the taught master's route, you don't get that choice. But if you're taking the master's in research route, then you got a choice to contact a potential supervisor, and you go through the process with them. So in other words, you actually have a team of 2 supervisors for a master's in research. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just to add that in France you can choose. Actually, it's on you. So it's a little bit the same process. You contact a supervisor, and yeah, you decide together a topic for your MA. It's a little bit the same that for PhD.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions in the room?
We have another question online. So
we have one. We can still post first.
Okay, if you have a question, you can go ahead and speak.
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much for the insightful sessions. My name is Muhammad Joji from Bayero University. I have interest in. Okay, I've mentioned my area of interest is in African history, particularly the legacy and effect of the transatlantic slave trade during the 17th and 18th century. how Black history was uprooted during those centuries. So I'm interested in rediscovering the effect that slavery had. But to do that, I will have to use DNA samples with families that are currently in the regions that I want to work in, especially southwestern Lagos, to use this DNA to rediscover the current descendants that are either in Europe or America. So I'm open to look at study in Europe, particularly in areas that slaves were taken. So I need advice to kind of triangulate which university I'm supposed to go for this type of research. Thank you.
Not my field.
Yeah, I think we need to leave that to Sarah. You're the historian.
Yeah, well, I can definitely connect you with historians working on this. I mean, on Black Atlantic and slavery. That's very possible. But I don't honestly. I'm honest. It's not my field, so I don't know if it is possible to work with DNA samples. I don't know what's the ethic behind this question. So, but I'm not the right person. Or I'm a historian, but I study modern history. So we can keep in touch, and I can put you in contact with a specialist of these questions that will be surely able to answer you in a a better way.
All right.
I
Thank
think
you.
you have our emails, don't you?
All right. Yeah, I'll get that. Thank you. Really indebted.
Just to add, just to add that you may want to look, you may want to speak to those who work in medical humanities. That's looking like the space you most sit, your work might situate within medical humanities.
All right. Duly noted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And yeah, there's a question online indeed about someone who has a very disparate background, an MA degree in IT, sorry, a BA degree in IT, an MA in African beliefs and traditional medicine, but wants to do a PhD in semiotics and cultural architecture. How to bring these together, or how to work with these towards a good PhD application. So does any one of the panelists here feel like answering on that one? Samantha, you are nodding.
Yeah. This comes across as an interdisciplinary study, one which has a strong leaning towards indigenous knowledge systems. And indeed, there are possibilities of triangulating these three disciplines into this new space you're looking at. But I think I'll appreciate more details if you see what I mean. So, what particular elements of IT are you thinking of? Are you thinking of exploring in that regard? Having said that, research is advancing quite quickly and deeply too, along the lines of combining African epistemologies with AI in terms apropos to particularly mappings, saliency mappings. Yeah, so that's and natural language processing. So it will be helpful to know which particular element of IT you're looking at combining this with. But it sounds really interesting, and happy to have a chat later if it's something you'd like to explore further. Yeah.
Thank you, Portia.
Yeah, so just that kind of question on what if you have educational CV that is a bit kind of a patchwork. So that does happen. So we had a colleague of mine who was at King's and just moved to Coventry called Fred Adwang. He's Kenyan, and his BA was in agriculture. I think even his PhD was in like agronomy, and then he ends up in a politics department working on Kenyan politics. So it's possible, but I think what you would have to then really demonstrate is through the research proposal that you, despite maybe not having like a really strong disciplinary background, are you still able to make sense of the key literatures that you would then want to be making an intervention in? So that's when I'd be really interested in kind of saying, okay, like, but do they if they want to locate their work in this field, have they shown that they understand how exactly these issues are being dealt with in this field from a political sociology perspective, from a political anthropology perspective? And then I see we also have a question on how much you should curate your research to meet that of your potential supervisor. So I guess that's been covered already. We've said there really needs to be a good fit. But that fit can be quite broadly defined. Like within my work, I'm kind of in 3 disciplines. Within those disciplines, there are a variety of topics that I might find interesting. I work on good governance and critically thinking about that. So that really puts anything in the kind of critical study of like public administration or political parties or governance or Lagos. Like there are lots of ways that like people there are a wide range of PhDs that I might like to supervise, but they would have to still speak to my research and my approach and the sorts of questions I'd be interested in asking. Or if someone came to me and said, I've read your work on Nigeria and you talk about X, and I'm actually looking at Paraguay in Latin America, but I still think it's the same question as X, just in this other case. Then I would be thinking, okay, can I bring in, if I was a primary supervisor, could I bring in a secondary or a co-supervisor who could fill in that gap in the knowledge? So it's not like you're looking for 100% match, but there does need to be a match of approach. And so I sometimes get PhD applications that thematically are very, very similar, but the broad approach is at odds. People saying like, I want to work in governance in Nigeria. These Nigerian politicians are just so badly behaved. I want to write a PhD about how terrible everything about Nigerian politics is. And I'm like, well, that's just not really the sort of PhD I'm interested in. So I think there are lots of ways of kind of matching it, but I think it also, everything we're saying about, it has to be a strong proposal, there has to be some match of your training. You're not infinitely flexible either of what you could write a convincing PhD application on.
Yeah, and I also think to add to that, I also think after your PhD has to be an independent field of study. Your PhD supervisor is not your boss and is not going to tell you this week you need to have done this, next week you need to have done that. You're actually the one who is designing the project, who is figuring out how to find a good response on that research question. And your supervisor is actually an advisor, not a boss. It's actually, you're looking for advisors, not supervisors, which means that if you would cater it too much towards your potential advisor's CV, you are maybe giving up certain of your own research interests or preferences. And in the end, it will backfire because I have seen, if, PhD students, you cannot pretend because this is, as Portia was saying, it's a kind of relationship of a marriage. After a certain time, your preferences still come back. They will force themselves upon you. And if you have been giving up on these because your supervisor maybe is not into these, then don't do it. Don't go there because it would mean giving up a part of your identity as a scholar and it will haunt you. So don't give up too much of your own and identity as a scholar when looking for a good supervisor and funding. We're 2 minutes away from the end of this panel. I think this is the right moment to thank everybody in the online room, and all the panelists who have made time at this time of the day to be reflecting with us and sharing their do's and don'ts in their universities and maybe national research universes. Thank you, Samantha. You've been very busy flying in and out. So thanks for having made the time, this short notice. Thank you also everybody in the room, online and in Lagos room. And yeah, wishing all of you good, beginnings of PhD lives. and
Thank you
enjoy the
so much.
conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to the room.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Good evening.
Good evening.